right, welcome everybody. Another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. The commission is in session. Alaska, the final frontier. In the words of Kevin Hart, y'all gonna learn today. Why? Because there's some interesting things that you know nothing about with Alaska. And you're going to basically learn all about what life in Alaska as a planner is all about, and hopefully how those lessons can maybe even be applied in the lower 48, because that's something we should all strive for, right? Learn a little something and have some better careers ahead of us. So as part of this podcast, one of the things that we do, turn it over to Mr. K-Man for our whiskey pairing. Don, what is the greatest whiskey pairing you could think of for our discussion today about the last frontier, Alaska?
I'm going to go with Alaska Outlaw Whiskey, homemade on the Russian border near Wasilla.
It's right down the street from Russia, right? Okay. Yet another one that we're going to have to try at your expense. So Alaska, I want to talk a little bit about our impressions of Alaska before we get too far ahead of ourselves and introduce our wonderful guest. Jess, you had the biggest change. Holy cow. Your story. You went from the southeast and listening and eating the boiled peanuts. There, I got that right. Right. And lots of grits with an S, of course. And then you decided to move yourself clear up into, I mean, it's about as geographically far away as you can get. I think Hawaii might have been a tad bit farther, but tell us about your impressions of what it was like your first day when you rolled into Alaska.
Well, when I rolled into Alaska, it was middle of May, and I moved to Fairbanks. I have some family up there. And the thing that I remember was looking out of the plane, and it was midnight. That's kind of how from East Coast to West Coast, you end up being real late. You kind of lose time, going across the US. And I looked out the window and there was sun outside. It was kind of like it was, like 7 p.m. on a summer day, 8 o'clock, where there's a little bit of sun. And I was like, what is this magic? And it was so strange, and it was cold still. I mean, it was maybe 40 degrees in Fairbanks in May, 40, 30 what night when the sun wasn't down, or when the sun was a little bit more down. And what I learned, because the next day I went to a parade, and it was celebrating just something. It was some cute little festival in downtown Fairbanks. And it was I believe it was like the solstice perhaps was happening. And no, that wouldn't have been right. That would have been June. But they had some little parade going on. And I remember that we had just reached something called 24 hours of civil twilight in Fairbanks, which means that you can do outdoor activities without artificial lighting 24 hours a day. And that was just super wild.
Or were people just,
I don't know
people
why
so excited to stripping clothes, like around here when spring comes, like not even spring, in the late winter, we have a day in March almost every year where it hits about 50 degrees for like one day. People lose their damn minds. They strip everything off. They're running down the greenbelt half naked because they're just so excited.
Flip-flops.
So
yeah. So that was the magic. And it was just like, wow. And people were awake and out. It was wild to me.
It's a cool place, right? So unique, so cool. Very, very, very different, and don't take some of those things for granted like you might have done in the South, right? Dawn, your first impressions. What were your first walking into Alaska, looking around, going, what the heck? What did you see?
Well, my first trip was on an all expense paid vacation, and we thought we were like doing the rugged thing. Like we were taking the train from Anchorage to Talkeetna, and you're like, oh my God, this is back there. We are so far out of civilization. What is this? This is wild. And then a couple of years later is when I got the call from Lauren Driscoll, who was one of the hosts on our first few episodes with the Mat-Su Borough up there, wanting to do a project. And Talkeetna ends up being there. So what felt like this rugged and really long 4-hour train trip ends up being this 2-hour car ride. You're like, we're not that far off the beaten path. This isn't that remote. And you learn, and I think our guest today will tell us, once you get away from the places where all the cruise people go, that's when you get into real Alaska. It has nothing to do with the reality TV shows. It has nothing to do with the tourism industry. And that's when you start to get to really see everything that's so mesmerizing. And for me, with the Matsu Borough, here's a county that's geographically the size of West Virginia. And just think about governing an area like that from all the different facets of planning and infrastructure and things like that. And so I've been up there probably 16 or 17 times now from a work perspective, and it never gets old because of that uniqueness related to both environment and adventures, and for a nerd like me, the policy framework that exists up there.
Yeah.
So my impressions, I'll give you a few things briefly, but my first time up there was to go hunt a Russian submarine in the Navy, which was pretty wild. Got to go up to Fairview. That's a local street here, Fairbanks. Let's get that right. And try to go fly on this Russian sub that was shooting flares up at our plane. And it was pretty wild. Second trip up was with Dawn. And so in that one, my first impressions was it was so unique to look at the menus. I'm such a foodie. I'm looking around, I'm seeing elk and antelope and reindeer. Like, where the heck am I? Right? It's so different. But I have a sad story I have to tell you. Okay. I'm going to bring this all the way back down to Talkeetna because I'm afraid I think I killed the cat. Do you know what I mean?
You killed the mayor?
Mayor Stubbs?
Yes. Let me explain briefly.
No, you better have an explanation.
I'm going to try. So when we first moved to Boise, we took a little trek to the local zoo, which is, it's all right. It is what it is. The next day, the camel was dead. And I'm going, oh my gosh, how we went. And the next day, the camel was dead. My oldest daughter was born a few years later, took her to the zoo, came home the next day. The aged lion was dead. I'm like, oh, this is trending, right? So when Dawn and I went up there a few years ago, we went to Talkeetna. I saw the cat. The cat was, doing cat-like things, and everybody saw it, was having a good time. We got back a week later, the cat was dead. And so if you need an animal to be offed, just give me a holler. Oh my
gosh.
I'm your guy.
You're a hitman for animals.
I have apparently
important animals.
He assassinated Mayor Stubbs.
I can't believe this.
I'm sorry.
That's a political coup up there.
All right.
I know.
Now you fellas, you non-Alaskans, Adison and I are going to tell you one thing, and that is that you're being very flippant about this, but Talkeetna had a cat that was the honorary mayor for how long? He was like 17 years, right?
He was 20. I wasn't being flippant at all. I feel responsible. I apologize
because
to the town of Talkeetna. I recognize. Well, for people who don't know at home, Talkeetna is essentially sort of kind of at the base of Denali.
It is.
And so people from all over the world come to Denali to climb the, tallest mountain around, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's a major thing. And so Talkeetna is where they get all their pancakes and carb up and get ready. And the cat was a big deal. I am definitely not taking that lightly.
He lived in the West Rib bar.
He came to visit us when we were eating at the West Rib up there.
Addison, you remember he drank water out of a martini glass? I was like, I didn't even know you guys had martini glasses in this bar. And
yes. So to the people of Talkeetna and Greater Alaska and North America and the world, I apologize for killing the cat. I'm sorry. So Jess has already given it away a little bit of who our guest is. Might as well jump on in and go for it. Our guest today is obviously an expert on all things Alaska and the planning world, and we're so thrilled to have her, Miss Adison Spafford, Director of Planning and Public Involvement at CRW Engineering. Adison, thanks for coming in today. Appreciate you being with us.
Hi, I am really excited to be part of this podcast, and Alaska is very unique, and there was a cat, unfortunately, Chris, that was a mayor in Talkeetna. I'm really excited to be a part of this podcast. So thank you for inviting me.
And now we're going to have one of the true crime podcasts investigating us.
I'm going to have to investigate Chris because he's now a person of interest. Jeez.
Yes. So Adison, if you would, again, thank you for joining us, but tell us all about you. Tell us your journey to Alaska, and what your current role is, what you get paid to do. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I am from an island in Southeast Alaska the island's called Revillagigedo, but the city is called Ketchikan. So it's the first city, the salmon capital of the world. I was raised on that island, didn't leave the island until I was 18 years old. So really, my roots are deep into Southeast culture, fishing, hunting, berry picking. I grew up with indigenous culture, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian. My family is from there. I still have a lot of folks that live there, and it was probably one of the best places that I could dream of growing up. When I was 21, I decided to move to Anchorage and go to school here. I went to the University of Alaska Anchorage and got my bachelor's in business. And I was like, I'm not staying in Anchorage. I don't like this place. I'm not a city girl. I'm from an island. I love to be in remote places. Why would people drive 5 hours to get to the ocean to go halibut fishing? Or why wouldn't you just go in your backwoods to shoot a deer and, pick berries in the backyard? And I promised myself that I was going to get back to Ketchikan. But after I graduated from UAA, I was fortunate enough to get a job at the Denali Commission. The Denali Commission is a funding agency here in Alaska, similar to the Appalachian Regional Commission down in the lower 48 and the Delta Regional Commission. It's an independent federal agency. And their primary mission is to fund infrastructure in rural Alaska. So helping communities that are off the road system, that don't have running water, tribes, cities, boroughs that basically are, I would say, third world country status. And so when I got that job, I started to learn more about that and learn about Alaska. And really growing up in Ketchikan, I thought that Ketchikan and Juneau were the only places in Alaska. I didn't realize that there were 229 tribes in our state and 300 and some communities. And so I really got introduced to the entire state and really fell in love and developed a passion for helping people in rural communities that have needs and are living in third world country conditions. No running water, no toilets. People that don't have roads. So I just developed this passion and really fell in love with the work that I am doing now. I guess, just coming from where I came from and then getting to Anchorage and getting that job at the Denali Commission is really what lit the fire for me to be able to do what I do now and helping rural communities and tribal governments develop projects.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Adison, I want to know, what's a project that you've just got a real passion for right now, or one in the past that you've worked on that it just like speaks to that heart that you have for Alaska and for those rural communities?
Well, I would say I've been helping communities. There are several communities in Alaska that are suffering from climate change, erosion issues, permafrost degradation. So their communities are basically disappearing. And I would say there are a couple communities that come to mind. One is Newtok and the other one is Kivalina. And so over the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, I've been working with both of those communities. Newtok, their community, it's from the forecast and everything. They're located in Western Alaska, and they've been in planning to relocate their community for probably about 20 years. And so I've been part of a team to help them secure funding for relocation, and they're actually in the process of building roads and building homes and relocating at this time. The other one is Kivalina. so I'm working on a community master plan that is helping the community relocate from their existing site 7 miles up into a site where they'll be protected. And it is probably one of the most rewarding things that I could do, is try to help get those projects developed. And when we're looking at relocation master plans for those communities, what we're doing is developing planning documents that we're designing entirely new communities. And so, and the goal of that is to help them secure funding for infrastructure so they can start to build their communities, which is, it's a very long process. As you guys know, as planners, when you start to plan something, you know, we don't get to see things for quite some time. And so I would say those are the 2 projects that come to mind that I have a very strong passion for, and feel very connected to the people that I work with. They're different cultures. Newtok is Yupik Eskimo. English is their second language. And then Kivalina is Inupiaq. And so it's up in the Northwest Arctic. So you have to, both of those communities, like Newtok, you fly from Anchorage to Bethel, and then you get on a little plane, and then you fly out to Newtok, and then you have to get on a boat and go to Matarvik. And then Kivalina, you fly from Anchorage to Kotzebue, and then you get on a little plane and fly from Kotzebue to Kivalina. So, yeah, I would say those are my 2 projects right now. Kivalina is one that I just got back from yesterday that, you know, it would take, I have a few other projects, but those 2 take pretty much my full time.
Provide a little more, Adison, because I know when we first met in 2015, I mean, you've been working in Kivalina at least that long, because I remember you talking about it. Give a little bit more perspective on why they're having to do that, what's causing that, a little bit of the history. And then I want to ask you then about the uniqueness of planning for that new community and new infrastructure that I think for the upper one is very different than the lower 48. So give us a little background on Kivalina specifically.
Yeah, and I would say for the entire state and probably the lower 48 too, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, you know, I don't know the exact year, but long time ago, they were responsible for providing education to the students. And so it was their responsibility to provide education, healthcare, housing, and this is all because of the land exchange, the Alaska Native Settlement Claims Act. And so there's a long history, and that it goes back a long ways. And so when the Bureau of Indian Affairs came into Alaska and the federal government with that land exchange, they put schools in different locations throughout the state. So for Kivalina specifically, they built a school on a barrier island, and all of the rural communities that are living off the road system, not all of them, but some of them, like Kivalina for specifically, their communities are built around the school. And the reason for that is because the school is the main tenant. They provide the water and sewer. It's the local place that everyone goes to take showers. It is the place that people get together to play sports. It is the main tenant for a community like Kivalina, because the homes that are built, they don't have running water and sewer. They are using honey buckets. They have now, what they have is a portable system for sanitation to make sure that they, you know, can wash their hands and get clean water for cooking and drinking. And so the school is basically the heart of the community. And so wherever the school goes, the community goes, and that's just been what's happened in the past. And so for Kivalina, you know, the school was built, the community built around it, and now the community is suffering from severe erosion and flooding.
So you used a unique Alaska term there, off the road system. Explain what that means for the only thing people know about Alaska is from the Discovery Channel or a cruise.
Yeah, so pretty much the road system, it starts, you can go from Anchorage to Fairbanks. You can drive down to Seward, the Kenai Peninsula, and that's pretty much it. And all the other communities, the 229 tribes and the 350 communities, you either have to take a boat to or you have to fly to. So you have to get from Anchorage to Fairbanks or Costa View, and they call them hub communities. And so there's different regions in Alaska and different hubs. And so everything off the road system, or everything outside of Anchorage or Fairbanks, pretty much you have to fly to or drive to.
Yeah. So, and your little town too, right? Your island.
Yeah.
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 So why
Boat
don't you just go plow in and put up some new sewer lines and water lines and everything else to solve that problem?
That is a great question. And that's something that, I think for me, I feel very passionate about trying to help solve those problems. And I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations like the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, which that is their sole mission, is to provide healthy communities through sanitation and safe drinking water. And the price and the cost to get some of the projects developed in some of these communities is astronomical. I think I worked with Buckland several years back, and their water and sewer infrastructure was over $30 million. And so it is just really a matter of planning and working to secure funding and trying to get some of these projects developed. And Alaska is just so far behind the curve in so many different ways. And I think one of the biggest challenges is the layers of government. And from my experience, when you're trying to plan and get projects developed, you're working with a city, you're working with a tribe, you're working with a borough, you're working with a health organization, you're working with a regional corporation, a village corporation, and a native corporation. So there's just so many different levels of government, and a majority of the time they're not communicating with each other. And so they're working a little bit, and they are working in silos and developing their own priority project list, and they're developing, they're seeking their own projects. And my job and what I do is really try to gain consensus and bring people together and get priority projects developed, working together with all those entities. And it is a very difficult thing to do. And I think Alaska, working and planning for the last 10 years, it's really starting to make some headway in bringing some funding to the state to get some of those projects developed. And
So Addison, I'm going to pause for just a second, because I think for the folks listening to this podcast, as a Libra, I don't pay attention to my astrological sign very often, except for in one way. I am notoriously balanced. I always see both sides of this. And now let me explain where I'm going with this. Okay. You are the future in many ways. And what I mean by that is, on the one hand, I see you're dealing with an incredible, I guess I will use the word tragedy, right? In the sense that here's a proud group of people whose homeland is being taken from them by climate change, right? And all of the other things you talked about with public health, safety, welfare, sewer, sanitation, all those types of things that you're dealing with. There's a lot of really broken hearts about that situation. But then there's the other side. And the other side is, as a planner, you get to sort of think big and think creative, and to be able to plan in ways that very few people get to plan, right? Most people in the planning profession start off with writing a desk, as we know, in terms of development applications, or, hey, how can we get a flashing beacon over here? Well, you're recreating an entire town, right? And you have to do it contextually. Obviously, you have to, you're very culturally sensitive to everything that there's so, and then you talked about the layers of government. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that you're having to juggle, and it's not hard, but it's also incredibly amazing that you get to experience that, I think. So what I'm going with that is that in the lower 48, there's a lot of planners that maybe not even realize it yet, but to a degree are either already or will be dealing with similar things that you're dealing with because of climate change. So my question to you is, thinking about that, what are some of the lessons that you have learned that you think, hey, don't forget about this planner in, you know, Hoboken, New Jersey, or wherever they happen to be, right? What is it that they can learn from you? And what type of message can you share with them?
I would say, you know, being at the forefront of this, we are, you know, it takes time, and it does take sensitivity. You know, when you're talking about tearing down somebody's house that they've lived in, their family has lived in, the mental health component of it is, you know, really taken away from the desk part, you know, the paperwork and being behind, you know, just sitting behind your desk and pumping out resolutions or pumping out planning documents and preparing grant applications. You know, all that stuff is great and it's important, but you have to think about the mental health component of it, because it's a loss, it's a grief, it is, you know. And I've sat in these homes, I've gone to these people's, you know, I've cried with them, and it is huge. And you just, people don't understand that. I think we get so busy and we get so focused on, you know, putting in our hours for the day and trying to make all this stuff happen. And, you know, it is a loss to these people, you know. And I'm not as familiar with the lower 48, and I say I'm not as experienced with the urban planning side and working down in the lower 48, I would say. But
I mean, this isn't
really
an application for annexation, and the big public debate is, do we do 3 dwelling units an acre or 4 dwelling units an acre? And there's mental health anguish at the public meeting over something like that. This is not that.
You know, I laugh sometimes because I do urban planning, and I, you know, here in Anchorage, and I go to public meetings, and, you know, we're redoing a school playground, and the people that get upset about it. And I just laugh sometimes because here I am, you know, coming from Kivalina, where, you know, it's just, the conditions are so poor. And it's just, I, you know, I'm such an advocate with just like what really matters. And you have to really think about the mental health component of what people are going through. And, you know, and I wouldn't discount the fact that, you know, whether you're urban or rural or whatever you're going through, but as a planner, you know, I think we lose sight of that component. And for me, I would say, I would want to share that with other people, that to just take into consideration that anytime we're changing any infrastructure or any community or anything, you know, you're changing something or causing a loss to different people. And I think that's really important. And I would share that, the mental health component. And then I would also share, we're developing like housing policies and housing committees and best practices for relocation. And, you know, I go around the state of Alaska and I'm asking, do you guys have an example? I even go to federal agencies like the Housing Urban Development or Bureau of Indian Affairs or Federal Highways. Like, do you guys have anything like this? And I'm actually creating it and leading it and facilitating it and creating these housing committees, because basically, like in Kivalina, you know, if and when they choose to relocate, I'm just doing the master plan, giving them a tool that they can use. If and when they choose to relocate, it's going to be a 10-year process. And there's politics that are involved. I mean, you have these small communities. Kivalina is about 400 plus, you know, a little over 400 people. And you have families that are on these councils. It's not, you know, they're so close, and it becomes very political and very personal. And so to put forth a policy and to help them get a framework that takes away the politics, takes away the personal issues is super important. And to be that third party facilitator, you know, that's, I guess, what I would say I'm really good at is that they trust me. They, you know, and that's what I really try to do, is to alleviate the politics and the personal side, and try to just say, okay, here's a guide, here's a tool for you to use. I am sorry, Chris, I kind of went all over the place.
No, that's awesome.
But you've got, I mean, even getting a home mortgage in many parts of Alaska based on our institutions in the United States is not the same. And you have to have special mechanisms and special organizations for that. And that could be a whole other subject for that. Jess, one more question, then I'll kick off maybe some rapid fire and have some fun here.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Adison, you know, I really appreciate your big love and passion for what you do. And it's, I said this at the beginning, but it's a labor of love up there. And what you do is just, it touches my heart. And I know that trust that those communities have with you is just amazing. And so I really appreciate you being here. But, thinking about Alaska, I always think about the coolest things I've ever seen in the world, and they're usually in Alaska. What's the coolest thing that you have gotten to see in your work as a planner in Alaska? Just anything. What is just the coolest thing?
Oh, there's so many. You know, I've been all over the state of Alaska in every region. You know, I would say I'm gonna say something that I just experienced because it was yesterday. So I was out in Kivalina. They're working on the new school up 7 miles from their existing location. The school will open in October. And the reason why the school was chosen at this location is because this huge material source was there. And it's away from the ocean, and it's on good soil, good ground. And so it's a sustainable location for them to develop their community. Well, in the material source, and I've been there probably 20 times over the last couple years, but I found this really amazing crystal. Well, the crystal was actually given to me by one of the workers that works out there. And I brought the crystal. I facilitated a joint council meeting, a city and tribe. I brought the crystal back to the meeting with me, and I was like, look at what is at your new town site. Like,
oh my gosh.
And all of the tribal members all of the people were taking pictures of it. They didn't even realize that it was in their backyard. And everybody was just so excited. And I think that was really cool, but
it's amazing.
There's just so much, Jess. It's really hard for me to share. Like when I go out to these villages, I just want to stay there because the culture is so calm, and just the beauty that you get to see, the rivers, the lakes, the greenery. Even the winter, I was just in Kivalina in May, and the snow was up to the roof of the homes. And I had to do door-to-door surveys, but it's still so beautiful. Like
Yelp
I
and
can't pick one. I mean,
Yelp and TripAdvisor don't help you on those journeys, right?
No. But I would say Ketchikan, and I'm from Ketchikan, and it's still the most beautiful place on this planet. I've been all over the place, but I can't pick one. Alaska's big.
Well, we'll wrap up with some rapid fire stuff. My esteemed colleague did forget the whiskey pairing, and I can't go without this because I still have a little bit of the Alaska Outlaw remaining here. So that's the one I had to go with for this one. So some quick rapid fire. Hairiest white knuckle plane ride you've been on?
Ooh.
Probably going to Ketchikan, actually. Yeah, the weather down there, it's Southeast Alaska, and it was actually on Alaska Airlines, believe it or not. And I've flown in probably 100 tiny little planes, but the Alaska Airlines flight was almost completely sideways, and you couldn't even see the airport. Rain, Southeast Alaska, Ketchikan, you get 13 feet of rain per year, blows sideways. Yeah. But also just going, some of these villages, that was probably the scariest recently, but I've been in many more.
What's the biggest fish you ever caught?
Ooh.
The biggest fish was probably a 60 to 80 pound halibut.
Oh, those are big boys.
Does bubble wrap work to keep the bears away when hiking?
Never tried it.
Oh.
We sing songs and we're super loud.
Is it true? Kathleen Madigan, the comedian, says this. She says that in Alaska you get one bear gun per family. Is that true, or is it?
No, I don't think that's true. I just use bear. That's not true.
No bear guns. Okay, well, yeah.
No.
Have you ever eaten bear, like a bear burger?
I have not, but I recently just had octopus that I caught.
You did?
Yes.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. What about your favorite place to go and vacation in Alaska?
Ketchikan.
Oh, okay, well, that was a song.
Sorry, it's the best.
Dumbest
If you haven't
question.
been there, you need to go.
Dumbest question that cruise ship people ask upon arrival.
Oh, can I just say it's
Oh,
how do they get
wait.
those? Hey, she can answer this too, but I'm telling you, it's how do they get all those barrels through the pipeline?
Oh, I always like the one in Juneau when people ask, what's the elevation here?
gosh.
Like they had boated uphill from Vancouver or something like that.
What's your favorite,
Well,
Adison?
Well, I grew up in the Ketchikan. We get 1 million tourists per summer, but it cracks me up because they come up on the cruise ship from Seattle or Florida or wherever they come from, and then they get to Ketchikan and they ask what lake it is. It's the ocean that they.
And what currency? What currency do we use here? Can I use dollars? What's
Yeah.
Well, Jess is in Florida. Jess, have you been on a cruise from Florida all the way to Ketchikan and wondered what lake you're in? That you? Don't be shy. It's okay if it was you.
But I will tell you this, that you were talking about those white knuckle, like harrowing plane rides, and the worst one. And I've been on little planes too in Alaska, and those kind of crazy conditions like Addison's talking about, where it's just scaring you to death. But the worst plane ride I've ever been in was from Orlando to Pensacola, and I thought I was gonna die. I am never flying that unnamed airline again.
nice hot humid air that messes with everything. I've been there, and
so
lots
scary.
of flights there. Addison, I got a couple of quick questions for you. I got to know, what's your favorite Alaska meal?
Oh my goodness! Well, I love Dungeness crab. I'm used to, we jump in the skiff and we go set shrimp and crab pots. We throw in a couple poles, jump off the boat, and pull the pots, and then head to the beach and cook it. And that's probably my favorite. I love backstrap, whitetail, Sitka whitetail deer, or Sitka blacktail. I'm sorry, got that wrong.
How dare you?
And I know, right? But I would say here in Anchorage, it has to be Moose's too. That's one of my favorite pizza places.
Oh,
it is
so good. And thin
crust.
crust. They do it right. I love
Another
it.
quick question for you is, can you see Russia from your front door?
Oh no.
No, I cannot. But I have been to Little Diomede, which is an island. We almost crossed the line there with the airspace, the Russian airspace. We almost went over that. So no, we cannot see it, but I've been pretty close. You have to fly very far up north to be able to see.
Yeah.
I'm
And
sure.
it's Little Diomede, and you look over at Big Diomede, and Big Diomede's
Russia.
that's the other side. Yeah. And that's where
but you have to
go a long way.
You cannot see it from Anchorage or Palmer or Wasilla.
Yeah, you can't.
But I did see a Russian Imperial Stout at Moose's Tooth one time, I think.
That's
all
nice.
right. Well, Addison, you've certainly proven that there's more to Alaska than reindeer snow and the world's largest cabbage. And we appreciate you and all that you're doing and explaining why planning in Alaska rocks. We thank you so much for coming into the Planning Commission podcast today. Any last words for the folks, especially the lower 48, who've never even paid attention to Alaska? What are they thinking?
No, thank you guys for having me. I would just say, I think the work we do is so important, and I just yeah, I don't have anything else to share, but thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to listening to other podcasts and learning from you all and learning from the lower 48. I always look to learn what other folks are doing, especially working with indigenous tribes throughout, aside from Alaska. So that's
right.
what I would share.
Well, thank you so much. Your story is, I think, perhaps the most compelling one that we've heard to date. It's an unbelievable story, and the things that you're dealing with there's no comparison. There's just no comparison to the things that you're confronting on a daily basis. So keep up all the great work, the good fight, everything else, and we thank you for coming in today. So, commissioners, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. We'll continue to try to do better, and we'll see you on the flip side.